they're a very critical audience. They'll be very honest if they don't like something. So I quite like that hard, direct feedback where they're like, you know, I don't know if my kids actually like this book. My name is Marita Davies and I'm a writer.
Great.
The book that is in front of us is called Teote and the Wall. The right way in my mind, it would be Teote and the Wall. It's a children's book that I wrote. Teote is my mother, and she is from, my mother and my mother's family are all from a country called Kiribati, which is a group of islands in the middle of the Pacific. So this book is on her building a wall to stop inundating oceans, rising tides coming into her house on the island.
What's the best bit of feedback you've gotten about the book?
I once went to a primary school and read the book and had a discussion and some activities about Kiribati and what a rising tide looks like and sounds like and feels like. And at the end of the session, one kid came up to me and was like, "That was nothing about Christmas." And I was like, "No." And he was like, "I thought you were coming to speak about Christmas." And I was like, "I'm really sorry, I'm not here to speak about Christmas." And he was really unhappy with me.
And what made you decide to make it into a children's book?
If I'm totally honest, I was trying to impress some people that I greatly admire. And I told them that I had written a children's book. And they
Was
said,
this before or after you'd written the
This is before I'd written the book. And so I quickly raced home and started writing a book.
And how did your mum feel having the main character after her?
I've never asked. I often do things where I say, "Oh, I've done this," and you know, "You're involved somehow," and she's just like, "Okay."
What started you off on writing initially?
When I look back over calling myself a writer and being a writer, I've realised that I think for as long as I've been able to write, I have been a writer. I've written every day. Growing up, I wrote a lot. I did a lot of diary writing. Whenever I had a problem about something, I always wrote about it. I think I wrote songs, I wrote poems, I wrote stories. I just did a lot of writing. It's kind of how I expressed my feelings to myself and to other people. I have been very lucky and fortunate to be able to turn that into a career. I suppose it's just kind of grown from there.
Why do you think it's important to talk about such serious issues to children or in this kind of format?
I think when I wrote the book, I was really, and to a certain extent I still am, climate change fatigued, in that this book is absolutely about living with climate change effects, but it wasn't really, it was made very political, and it still is a political issue. But for my personal experience of living with climate change and seeing my family in Kiribati live with that, it's not political for them. And so I just wanted to be able to tell that story of without, climate change isn't mentioned in the book, environment isn't mentioned in the book. So I think I just wanted to approach that topic with kids, but also just lots of people haven't heard of the country Kiribati, and this was my way of telling a Kiribati story to people and introducing it. It's one that I know, it's a story that I know intimately, and it's just my way of sort of saying, this is a Kiribati story and I want you to know about the country that I'm from.
Why do you think humans are sort of inbuilt to talk about stories or to share stories?
From a Kiribati culture, and also, I suppose, a wider Pacific culture. The culture is reliant on storytelling. Stories are passed down from generation to generation. I started particularly really looking into climate change and climate change effects because whenever I'd tell people, you know, my mother's from Kiribati, the people that had heard of the country would say, oh, that's the country going underwater, right? And I'd say, yeah. And then I started to realise, like, I should know more about this. And so me wanting to know more about that actually led to an identity exploration of like, oh, I really need to know my culture and I have to do my part to keep this alive. I always have this sort of sense of guilt that, you know, whenever there's a full moon, there's a high tide. Every now and again there's a king tide, and I do think of my cousins, my aunties and uncles back in the islands.
How do you look after yourself other than writing?
I try and exercise as much as I can. Probably, you know, I'll probably go for walks or with COVID, I'm missing team sport.
Yeah.
I listen to music. I grew up playing a lot of music, so listening to music helps a lot. I do a bit of watercolours. Yeah, I think a lot of spending time outside helps.
How did your immediate family, partner and children receive the book?
I think I've read the book to my kids maybe twice.
Okay. I've been trying to think of an activity that we could do together,
Yeah.
like or writing together.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd challenge both of us to do a 10-word story.
Oh my God!
If you don't mind. Not right now, you have time.
Was that right?
Because I've worked in education before, many children's books just seem to be an animal who's facing some kind of problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in one of these is animals and one of them is problems.
Okay.
So we're both going to draw out one of each and we've got to write, we'll say in a week or something like that?
Sure.
Okay.
Blue whale. Really appreciate the writing prompt. With a large student debt.
A bear having low iron.
Oh no, what's the bear gonna do? Stories are all we have. Like, that's how we stay who we are, that's how we remember our ancestors, that's how we've learnt from generations before us. So Kiribati culture has always been reliant on storytelling. It's an Indigenous culture and there are creation stories that have been passed down from ancestor to ancestor down to my generation, and it is my responsibility as a parent to pass them on to my own children. Of course stories change, but humans, that's humankind. But the essence of the stories have to remain. So it feels like a natural extension for how I have been brought up with a Pacific Island culture, to just keep telling those stories. A stick insect. Wanting to be an influencer.
Oh, well, no. A pig dealing with a software update.